Hey everyone! Today I'm using Gerda Steiner Design's More Than Pie stamp set and sharing a card that features a super easy slider card and a bit of stamp manipulation. The set has a super cute bear holding a pie, and I love his expression staring at the pie, but I wanted to separate the two images. So I'm going to mask off part of this bear using a full adhesive post-it. I stamp it onto the post-it, and I'm just going to cut out the area that I want masked off, which includes his hands and the pie. I'll remove the post-it around that area and stamp the image again. So you'll see that the stamp stamps, but without the hands and the pie. And to complete this image, I'm going to use a pencil to draw in the rest of the image. I'm going to draw in his mouth and give him two little arms. And I'll also stamp out the standalone pie image from this set as well. I'm going to be using that as well, and it'd be easier than trying to mask off the rest of that pie. And once I'm done, I'll use a Copic multiliner to draw over my pencil lines, and I'll erase any pencil marks that I have left behind. And this way I can color the image with Copics without worrying about it smearing. I'll be using a mix of alcohol markers to color in this image, and you'll see that I sort of cheat coloring this in because I'll just scribble the color. I realize that it takes up a large area and I'm going to be fussy cutting anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And it makes life a little bit easier. For all the colors, I'll be listing them down below on the description bar and also on my blog. But this coloring is pretty simple, and I'm just using mainly browns and a little gray. Once my coloring and fussy cutting is done, I'm grabbing the Lawn Fawn outside in stitch squares and using the second biggest square to create a window for this pie to sit on. I really like how this adds the stitching detail around this square. So once I die cut this out, I'll also trim out a piece of craft cardstock to create a windowsill. Once I do this, it looks kind of plain with just the windowsill, so I also decided that I wanted to create a frame for the window using the same craft colored cardstock. I'll use the same Lawn Fawn outside in stitch square, and I'll also trim around that square, leaving a little bit around the stitch detailing so it creates a cool frame for the window. And so next for the background, I wanted to create the outside of the house and I wanted it to be brick. I'm inking up the entire card with Fired Brick Distress ink, and I'm using Georgia Pacific cardstock. It's something I found at Walmart, and I find it super reasonably priced. I didn't try too hard to blend this out well, and since brick buildings aren't perfect, this doesn't need to be. So once I lay down this first layer of color, I'm going to go ahead and pull out my brick stencil and use painter's tape to tape it down so it doesn't move while I'm inking this up. For this color, I'm using H Mahogany to create the brick look. Because I used painter's tape, it kind of ripped the bottom of the card when I was peeling it off. So I'll go ahead and trim this down, and you never really know. So I'll go ahead and finish inking up the rest of the card panel, and my brick building is created. So when I'm done, I want to put together the window, and I decided I wanted to add a bit of distress ink to the windowsill so it didn't look so flat. I realized that distress ink really helps with just adding a bit of dimension to like small things like this. For the window frame, I'm adding score tape around the edges, and I'm adding a piece of acetate to it for the effect of a window. So once the acetate is adhered, I'll go ahead and add another layer of score tape so I can add this to the card panel itself. I think the acetate gives it a cool effect because it does look like the bear is inside the house and you're peeking through, seeing him through the window. So once I add the frame, I'll go ahead and also add the windowsill to the card. And I'll flip around the card to add foam tape on the edge of the card. The foam will allow us the dimension to create a slider for this card. And I'll also go ahead and add the pie to the window so I can see how I want the bear positioned on the slider. For the slider piece itself, I picked out a cream colored piece of paper and I measure quickly to see how wide I want the slider to be. And for this card, it's about 2 3/4 wide. And I'll also add an additional piece of foam at the bottom of the card, and this will be a stopper for the slider. We also need to create a slider stopper, which is a 1/4 inch strip that will be at the bottom of this slider. Once I create the slider channel, I can have the bear be pulled up and stopped at a certain point, and that little strip at the bottom will help us do so. So I just adhere a piece that is wider than the channel itself and add it to the bottom. I go ahead and run the bear through the Xyron sticker maker so I can adhere this directly to the slider piece. So we don't need a die for a slider channel or anything. We're creating our own and it's a large one, so we can use the cream colored piece of paper for the background. So I'm adhering the bear directly on the slider piece and I'm seeing how far I want the bear to peek up. Then I'll go ahead and mark it off and add small strips of foam tape on the side. And so as you can see, the slider will stop when it hits that foam tape. So I should have stamped the sentiment first, but I didn't. So there's a bit of unevenness because I added foam tape on the edges of the card. So I'll cut out a piece of foam to put behind the card where I want to stamp the sentiment. So this allows me to stamp the sentiment and not have any issues. Once everything is ready to be put together, I'm just trimming the slider piece down so it's tall enough for a person to pull on the tab and it doesn't stick out too much on the card. So I'll even trim it down a little bit more. I'm using Lawn Fawn's Push Here stamp set to add the note Pull Here on top of the slider piece. Once everything is ready, I'm going to adhere this directly to my card base. I'll pull off the release paper to the foam tape and also use washi tape to hold the slider piece in place so I don't accidentally adhere the slider piece to the card base. If I did that, the slider wouldn't move at all. That's it for today's card. I think with a little stamp manipulation, I was able to create the scene I had imagined in my head for a while. I hope you enjoyed today's card. I'll see you guys next week for another video. Bye.